Hello, everybody. This is the 15th week of our Kendo talk, and we have Chris Bowden Sensei from Ichibyoshi Kendo Club, and he's going to be talking about Kendo and his experiences.
Okay, yeah, Kendo and my experiences. So I thought I'd talk about two different aspects of my experiences in Kendo, and the first would be how I started. And for me, that's a bit different for most people because I traveled to Korea after university to work as an English teacher. Uh, so I'd arrived in Korea and I'd been there for a couple of months. I made some friends and we go drinking after work and what have you. So I had a drinking buddy, and every night he would just go on about Kendo, meh, Kendo, Kendo. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. And he kept on asking me, you should try it, you should try it. And every time no, I'm just not interested. If I was going to do something, I'd do taekwondo or, boxing or something worthwhile. And then eventually one morning, Emma, my partner, just gave me the elbow in the, you promised to go to Kendo last night. I was like, oh, no. So long story short, I went along and did my first ever sort of kendo lesson. I went open minded and I ended up doing just footwork for the entire lesson, which is, looking back on it now, I don't understand why I went back. But I think it was a sort of test of my resilience. I sort of, okay, it's forward, back, left, right, bum, bum, and every now and again the sensei would come over and look at me and go, no, it's like this, and what have you. And I didn't speak any Korean really at that point, and my kendo teacher didn't speak any English at all. So it was all kind of done with posturing, and he was speaking some Korean, and I kind of guessed what he meant. And then the next lesson we did swinging the shinai. So I just, and that was it. I think it was almost like within the first few swings of the shinai, it was just like, oh, where's this been all my life? Flashback to childhood, fighting with sticks and what have you, and all those sort of things, Star Wars and Thundercats and all these things with swords. And I was like, oh yeah, I really like swords. I forgot that. And that was it. I was hooked then. I was like, right, I'm going to start doing this. Because I turned up to Korea and I wasn't being particularly healthy or anything. So I thought, right, I'm going to do something good with it. I'm going to get a bit fitter and learn a martial art. So once I'd sort of decided on that, I started to sort of clean myself up a little bit. That was a massive mess, and just focused on it. So I went twice. Well, I went every day of the week, so Monday to Friday, and I think I started off doing the one class, but very soon I went because I worked fairly late as an English teacher. The way I finished work, I could get to the class before, which was with all the high school students. So I ended up just doing 2 hours a day, week in, week out, and just loving it. And it was nice starting in Korea. Obviously, now I've been back in the UK for a long time. You can sort of recognize the differences. Some are just so much easier. Like Budo culture is far more understood in Japan, and all the reiho and what have you is very, very similar, if not identical to the Japanese, or at least to my understanding of it. They do it at the same time in pretty much the same fashions, and the same expectations are upon you. So that was nice to sort of live in that. For example, I used to walk around in my gi and hack all the time around no one bats an eyelid. It's like, oh, it's just a guy who does kendo. So you're just in this everybody's accepting the environment. You tell someone, oh, what do you do at the weekend? Oh, I do kendo, and they know what it is, and they have an expectation of it. Whereas in the UK, you're always having to sort of explain what kendo is, and no, it's not really that. And so it's just, yeah. No, I don't even get aikido. You just essentially just go, samurai. I'm a samurai. And they're, okay, cool. You know. And then so I explained that it was so dojos are a full time thing in Korea. So extracurricular activities are very common for school children and for most people who work, I think, as well. It's kind of expected that you have another string to your bow. You don't, because they work very hard. They work long hours in Korea. So a lot of people like to have another thing that sort of defines them, whether it be hiking up mountains or doing kendo. And not many adults do taekwondo unless they're sort of teachers or professionals, but a lot of adults do kendo. Um, so there's lots of practitioners and there's lots of full-time dojos. So hence I was able to train 5 days a week and then do competitions on weekends. Um, yeah, it's pretty cool. And there's a huge social side to it as well, which is something I want to. So you have in the university side. I always get jealous of university clubs because you were talking about the times you went out and you did stuff. So we'd go out about once a month with my dojo in Korea for meals. I mean, we'd even go on trips to like these like valleys, and you'd go swimming in the water and have barbecues, and it just be these idyllic times with a bunch of guys you sort of know quite well. And it's just this, that bond, that crossing of swords bond you have with people. And Emma would come along, and everyone makes you feel really welcome. And even when I went back to Korea for the WKC, afterwards I went down south to Busan, which is where I'd lived before. And we went back, and all of my old dojo friends came back to the dojo, even if they weren't doing kendo anymore. One of the, I'll get back into kendo soon. Promise. But I really missed that, and it was nice. It was really touching to sort of see them all, because they would all, even when I was still practicing in Korea, not because of me, the message would go out to all of the members, past and present, right? We're going out for a meal, or we're doing this or that, and a lot of people would make the effort, even if they hadn't been doing kendo for ages, to come and play, play with everybody. It's nice. Um, so there's some differences in Korean kendo versus sort of Japanese kendo, I guess, for want of a better word, or international kendo. I get asked this quite a lot because as soon as people find out that I studied it there for a while, they, just, ooh, isn't Korean kendo like completely different? No, no, not at all. Uh, but there are some differences, and when you kind of conflate them all together, it makes Korean kendo sound vastly different. So, firstly, there is the kendo, the gomdo, which is the same kanji, just that's how the Koreans pronounce the word gomdo. But there's also an association, or in Korea, I think it might be called Korean kendo. So when people say Korean kendo is different, literally they're not wrong. But what the people listening are thinking about is that Korea kendo in Korea is different. So I think in the UK we have some different associations. It's a little bit like that little splinter group off in Korea. I think I asked about it once, and my sensei said, "Just don't worry about it. It's not they don't do no, they didn't do proper kendo. They don't do international kendo. They do more sort of Korean focus." So I think that's one thing that sort of needs to get not ignored, but it's not part of what people are really concerned about, which is the international kendo, which there are some differences, and that kind of harks back to the history. So in Korea was a colony of Japan until 1945, and then when Japan left, uh, Koreans sort of continued to do things like kendo and judo and what have you, but they took a lot of the Japanese culture out because obviously they've been oppressed and forced to learn Japanese. So, for example, all the Japanese terminology is now Korean terminology. Same words, just they use Korean. They don't have to use that. Um, so that's one thing. So if you ever go to Korea and want to practice kendo, you won't understand a word. When I came back to this country, I was going around. I knew all this stuff, but I couldn't tell people what I could do. Or someone say, "Oh, do this waza." Waza? I don't know what a waza is. Waza. But it took me. I made sure I learned it, and I'm getting better with it. I'm trying to study Japanese as well now to again sort of help me with it. Reading the not the kanji, but the hiragana and the katakana, and just and the pronunciation. So there's that. So we've got the most famous, I guess, is the Korean uniform, which is the white with the black stripe down the side. I don't know why they have that. I suspect it's a national flag thing because their national flag is a white background with these black stripes on it. And it's a little bit like, yeah, the national team wear that, but like in football, all the kids kind of aspire to that and wear those ones. Whereas the vast majority of people wear the blue, and then some people wear white. So much like in Japan. But I think quite a lot of the young kids, especially who are really into, have the aspirations to be part of the national team. Wear the national team uniform. One of the weirdest things it took me used to get when I came back was Sonkyo. There's no Sonkyo in Korean Kendo because
Really?
it's a Japanese. No, it's a Japanese a ritual thing. I think. Uh, so they just you line up, and it's hajime, and you go from standing.
So is
So
there any
it took
like bowing in at the start, like
absolutely
similar?
absolutely everything. You just don't go down into Sonkyo. You step in, you bow, walk to the front, and it's hajime. Well, that's it. Boom. You start.
Seems way more efficient.
Yeah, yeah, it is, but it's that's the cultural side of kendo as well. You've got the Sonkos, and it's good for your core and your balance and all of those things. Yeah, so I can see how it's pointless in some ways when you sort of look at it as a martial art. Like, when is someone going to attack you when you're squatting with a sword? But it has a lot of benefits in other ways. Um, the other one that's again culture is there's no koshita, the little tab at the back of your hakama. They do have them. They have sort of two styles. So you have the traditional style, Japanese style, and then there's a bit more like a slightly more sports style where you get a big band around your waist and it's Velcro, which like in Japan, there's a lot more kids doing it, so it's just easier for getting it on and off and washing it in the washing machines and what have you. But the kushita, I think, is a very Japanese piece of part of the clothing, so it maybe a bit symbolic of being taken out. Uh,
Yeah, Velcro sounds horrible though. Why not snap fasteners? They would work just as well.
well, Velcro works better. I mean, do I have one still? No, I don't have one still. I left it in Korea when I by accident, but oh no, I do have one. I do have one somewhere. Yeah, it's just quite comfy, and there's no faffing around trying to tie. You can't really tie it up too tight, and because it's quite a big band, it's a really solid fit. It doesn't come undone, that's for sure. You still have the sort of ribbons at the front where you sort of tie it up so it looks the same. It's just not the first bit's not done. Uh,
Mhm.
what else? So there's quite a lot of little visual differences. For example, in competitions, the flags and the tasque are slightly different colors, white and blue. Again, because the Japanese ones represent Japanese flags, the Korean flag. Um, tasque, yeah. The grading differences. There's some slight grading differences. I don't know because I did obviously not graded all over Korea. I only graded in Busan, which is it's the second biggest city. So I'm assuming maybe things are done similarly there. Uh, it was essentially you do exactly the same. They're not testing on different things. But what I quite liked is you get to do both parts. And it seems a very efficient way of doing it. So you'd say you have 100 people, 50 people go off and do the jigeko and kirikaesh, and 50 people go off and do the kata and the written exam. So the written exam you have to do in person. They, you got given a tiny piece of paper and a pencil, and someone says, blah, 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 it's this question. And you have to write it down and turn it in your paper. And then you do your kata. And also in Korea, there's an additional kata you have to learn as well,
What is
which
the
is
additional content?
it's called the Bonggukgonbop, which it comes from a kind of famous Korean set of knights, basically, sort of equivalent of knights of the Round Table. Um, which
All I can
and
think
they
of
were sort of
is
the,
oh,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
that would be quite an amusing thing to do for kata, but
That would explain Koreans do love spam as well.
really, but spam is just it's
Yeah, no,
pleasing me.
spam. You can get spam. You can get spam as a present for Christmas. It's like cheers.
Wow, wow.
But yeah, so there was this these sort of King's Guard, I think they were, and the they were basically they were wiped out at some point when the Koreans were overrun. And there's this one document left from them, which is a kata. So I think part you can understand culturally they want to sort of preserve this, so everyone learns this kata, and it's actually been very useful. We've been doing it at Chibyoshi because it's not partnered kata. It's much more similar to say if you were doing taekwondo or karate or something like that. It's an individual kata which is more focused on footwork and balance and kikentai no ichi. Uh, yeah, so we've been doing that. So we've been going through it. The only problem is it's quite long. It takes a lot of memory, but it's lots of swinging the sword around, ski, different using different feet footwork, so stepping forward with different feet and what have you. And I always felt the benefit of that whenever I sort of have to learn waza that you don't have generic, standard ashi sabaki for, because my feet are a little bit freer from just doing this kata so much. You're not kind of suddenly worried about the kiken tainoichi because you've done it a load rather than on this one particular cut I've got to do like hiraki ashi or something like that. It's less confusing. You just got a lot better balance with it, which I always thought was quite good. So we've been doing that at Ichibyoshi, and that's working quite well. So maybe if we learn it well enough, next time we'll have an Ichibyoshi competition or whatever, and we'll have a demonstration. We'll put a demo on of it. And it's a lot of fun, especially for the grading because it's a long kata to remember. I think it's like 40 odd moves or something like that, and you all line up in squares like you would in a normal kind of demonstration of a kata, and they just go, and you all start swinging your swords around at the same time, and skis going, and people start going wrong and going at different times. It's absolute chaos, but you've just got to kind of hold your nerve because that's part of it. You've got to do your kata. So then while you're watching this like sword in front of you, like, do this and then that. Yeah, so that was definitely an experience. Uh, let's see. I think that's pretty much it for the grading. I just don't like the idea that they split it. It seems efficient to me because you can get it done in half the time. I guess you need twice as many judges or what have you, and then but you got to do the kata. So when I came back to the UK and I saw gradings here for the first time, or when I went to Kitamoto and I saw the gradings there, that's exactly how we do it in the UK. I always felt so bad if they didn't get through. Like, oh, well, they probably practice those kata so much that they got to, even if they know they're going to fail, they still get to at least I did well in my kata. But you get that kind of like the rug taken out from under your feet. Uh,
Yeah, that does sound a bit bad. The only kind of positive is that nobody really fails on kata below third dan, except I have seen people fail, which is weird. Um,
I think so. I think so. When I did my Yondan exam, there were a couple there repeating it because they'd failed on the kata. I think in Japan maybe it's not seen as important as when you get into your kendo later in life. Uh, Korea, I think because they've got taekwondo and everybody in Korea does taekwondo at some point. Like it's like going to scouts or what have you over there. Everybody does it. All males have to go into the military to do their national service. So all men over 21 have a black belt in taekwondo. So it's unsurprising that influences their kendo. So they do take well, at least in my dojo and what I saw there, they take the kata quite seriously.
that's something
Because
that I quite respect because like when you see all the other martial arts doing kata and they're all in time, but then you go to a grading in the UK and even like up to third dan, they're still doing kata, not timing with everyone else in the line. It's just a bit, I don't know.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why we don't have as much time over there, I guess. Uh, that's, I mean, that's difficult. So I did a quick sort of back of the fag packet calculation of how much kendo I did there, and so why I guess it was an advantage for me, I guess, because I started fairly late compared to most people. So I was doing 2 hours a day pretty much for uh, 5 days, no, 5 days a week for 6 years. So every year I was doing 500 hours of kendo. So most people in the UK are doing once a week 2 hours of kendo. So you've got 500 hours versus 100 hours. That's,
Oof.
you times that by 6 years, and that's 3,000 hours versus 600 hours. So, and it's just a lot. So you just get a lot more basics, a lot more of the repetition in. And that's what I'd like to really be able to do is expand kendo in the UK as much as I could, so people were able to train maybe 2 or 3 times a week.
Yeah,
Every
I
day
agree.
is a bit much at this point. There's not obviously not the demand for it. But if you could open a space for people to train like 3 times a week, that would just be wonderful. I mean, I suppose we do it at Ichibiyoshi. I mean, more 3 times in the week because we were running Tuesday, Thursdays, and Saturdays at Ichibiyoshi. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I think most
but
dojos manage 3 times a week. I know like all university dojos in Scotland have that. I know. Yeah, most of the dojos in Scotland I think manage 3 times a week. Maybe Aberdeen doesn't, but yeah, I don't know.
hmm, it's hard. It's normally the same sort of core who go to all sessions. But it'd be nice if you had, like, say, 30 people coming 3 times a week. That would be
Oh yeah,
absolutely fantastic. Because once you get over 10, the atmosphere in the dojo changes. You know, a group mentality
obviously.
happens.
Yeah, yeah,
She and I start to move differently. People start to work together, and it's not something you can't yell at people to make them do that. It's just the bigger the group gets, the more unified they become.
yeah. And it's easier to do more exhausting things because everyone else is doing them as well. It's just a nice atmosphere. It's just like yeah, you're encouraging each other to do something without even saying it. It's just lovely.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, because I also did taekwondo in Korea as well. After a while, another friend asked me, so I'd do taekwondo, and I was doing that. Uh, but I had to turn up before work and train. So I'd get there early to sort of warm up, so that the master would come along and sort of train me after I'd basically done the basics and warm myself up. It's hard to make yourself work really hard. You'd work hard, but it's hard to drive yourself that bit harder. Whereas if you have a friend there, you got that little bit of competitive edge, or you got something to work against. But when you're working on your own, it's really hard. So this work during lockdown is just going to be tough for everybody, especially if you're trying to improve your fitness. I mean, it's a really good time to work on your basics because you kind of want to chillax a little bit more so you can think about it. It's not necessarily about churning the numbers out. It's about thinking about what you're doing a lot more.
Yeah.
So I think some of my takeaways from Korea is obviously I was able to work a lot more in a lot very efficient time. Uh, there's there's a lot more. So my dojo was dedicated to sort of to working hard. So we have a 1 hour session, uh, and then but I would do two of those. But the idea in those 1 hour sessions is you come and you work, and you don't waste other people's time. So when I come to the UK and I see people kind of like, okay, line up, like, oh, where are you? You should be here. I don't, and it wastes time, and it kind of like internally I'm just going because and then people, the sensei explains what you're supposed to be doing, and then someone goes, is it this or is that? You know, you were just expected to get on with it. If you messed it up the first time, that's fine. Just join the back of the line, watch what people are doing figure out what it is. Don't hold things up. Lots of little things. So when you take your armor off, you've got to get your armor off after Jigeko at the end before the sensei does, and you need to be there waiting, ready for him to say, right, this is what we're doing next. He doesn't take off his armor and then have to sit there kind of going, hurry up, guys. Yeah. So there's that, and again, it's a very cultural thing. So I got that a lot. Um, when I was, so I broke my arm a couple of times in Korea. We're doing various silly things, drinking and motorbike riding, not together, different times, different different reasons. And the first time I broke my hand was in a cast. It was my right hand, so I sent the message because you always let your sensei know if you're not going to turn up, you don't not turn up. So I can't come tell you, and he'd help me with my hand. He took me to the doctors to get it fixed in the car. So I was like, oh, okay, he knows I'm not talking rubbish. And I said, I can't come. My hand is still broken, haha, sort of thing. And then he just sent one word back, which was footwork. Yeah, absolutely. So turned up and I did footwork, and then for the 6 weeks, whatever, my hand was in a cast. It was just katate, and that was a really good learning experience because you really learn how to swing the shinai with the left arm after that. And it's not about building up the muscle; it's about working out how it swings. So it's well worth practicing. And these are the kind of things you can sort of work at in isolation whilst you're in lockdown, improving, sort of looking at how you can improve your absolute fundamental basics. Um, see, big tournaments, actually, that's one thing I do miss from Korea. Is there's so many people there. The tournaments were massive. Um, and also, so if you're new to Kendo in Korea, Yondan and above is sort of considered like professional. So you do professional grade tournaments, and then everyone else does these much smaller tournaments. I mean, there are some like the city tournaments and what have you. There, it's all grades, but quite a lot of the ones I went to were just, when I'd be a Q, but I'd be in a Q grade and I'd be in my own age category as well, which was quite nice. And it was a good way to kind of get used to kendo, especially at the Q grades, because I think at Q grade there's no drawing, it's hante. So you have these massive tournaments. They can't afford to have lots of draws and fights again, but it comes down to you've got to sort of show willing to attack. So if you try and defend and you draw, you've lost the match. So it really encourages that kind of aggressive attacking kendo rather than sort of blocking, because you've got the sensei there watching you blocking, and then they get to decide who wins and fail, or loses. They choose the guy who attacks. And I think that's a really good impetus to kind of get kendo moving the right way. Let's see what else. Um,
Do you think that like starting Kendo in Korea really helped you integrate into culture there and like helped you like, get more friends than I don't know just going to the pub and drinking a lot? I guess I don't know.
yeah, it certainly did. I got kind of accepted into a little mini family, I guess, in terms of that. I mean, I could have gone. Well, I did go. You do meet like Koreans who study English and speak English, and there are people do language exchanges. It's quite hard to get into like the deeper parts of Korean society, I guess. But I was certainly well accepted in the kendo, especially my dojo. I mean, I was the only guy in Busan who was not Korean doing kendo. That's like a
Like
city. It's like a city of 27 million people. There's a lot of people doing kendo there, so it was a bit daunting. Every tournament you go to, they'd be like, "Oh, there he is," and people will come up and talk to you because they can read your zeken, which is in Korean, and I can't read kanji. So a lot of Koreans have their names in kanji. So some guy will come up, and you're like, "Oh, I kind of recognize you," and they can go, "Oh, Chris, yeah, of course you can read my name. It's just in basic Korean." looking at kanji, so try not to try to avoid saying his name. But that was it was fun. It was fun being a bit sort of a bit like that, having. But it's also really daunting as well because you hear people, oh, Chris. You sort of got famous, but for the wrong reasons, I guess.
Well, there can definitely be worse reasons to be famous in Kendo. Like, oh no, don't train with him. He hits like a hammer.
That's probably what they were saying. I don't know. Difficult. It's words. You got to use that to your advantage. If you are sort of seen as, oh, he's a Westerner. He's like, yeah, big scary guy. You can think that. I'm just gonna concentrate on what I've got to do. But yeah, generally, I didn't receive any sort of uh, discrimination, I guess, in Korea. Only positive stuff, really, which is more comical than anything. It's been told you're a gentleman the whole time. Oh, you're English, you're a gentleman. So, I guess. So I guess after Korea, I sort of came back. I remember on the plane, on the flight home, sort of thinking about like sort of right, what am I going to do when I get back to the UK in terms of kendo? Because at this point, I had I had travelled back once and I went to a squad training. So I'd seen a squad training, but that was all that I'd seen for like British kendo. And when I'd been at that squad training, it was years and years before. I think it was. I think I'd been in armor for 3 months or something like that. Um, so I kind of was just worried that because I mean I'm English and I know what British people are like. I just thought, ah, is it going to be really weird? Because British people are very. It's got to be this or this, very. Everything has to be black and white. Whereas in Asia, things are a lot more grey. And I just kind of worried that people would just taken sort of grey kendo and pixelated it and made it like black and white. But it turned out not to be that case, which was very yeah. There's elements of it, but then that goes into sort of what makes British kendo versus what makes Korean kendo. So people sort of say, isn't Korean kendo different? It's like, yeah, of course, it's going to be a bit different. But you got to imagine that if Japan is 12 o'clock, Korea's probably like 11, and then we're sort of like 3 or 4 o'clock or something like that. We're just way off what they're sort of doing over there, really. But that's we do with what we've got, and the society kind of allows. And I think people, it's getting better all the time, and the BKA is growing all the time. The kendo's looking better all the time. It's just you're building on what came before. So yeah, that was my one fear, and so I just decided that I was going to right. I'm going to try and make kendo better in the UK. Didn't know how I was going to do it because I didn't know what was there. I also sort of made the sort of vow to right. I want to try and represent GB for kendo. So that was my other little goal I set myself, which I fortunately got to do. And then I got back to the UK. I think I went on the BKA Dojo Finder, very useful tool. I mean, it's exactly what you want. I just popped in my postcode, and I was in Aylesbury, and I was thinking I was going to have to go to Oxford, and I looked at it. Oh, there's a club in Aylesbury, like the little town, pokey little town I grew up in. And I turned up to Ichibiyoshi, and they're just a nice bunch of guys. Uh, yeah, and then that was it. I just kind of right, great. I had that same vibe that I kind of got with the guys in Korea. They weren't just sort of weirdos practicing with swords. They had a bit of a community. They were friendly with each other, and they kind of got it a bit. So I really enjoyed that. And then I just sort of said, "Hey, what are you guys doing this weekend?" And it's like, "Oh, actually, we're going to a kendo tournament." So, oh, cool. Can I come? I didn't. I so went off, and it was one in Oxford at the Oxford Spring tournament or something like that, and turned up and won. I was like, "Hey!" Unfortunately, it wasn't like that all the way from there, but it was a very nice introduction to British kendo. especially sort of like coming from nowhere. I look like a bit of a ringer, I guess. Um, so I was thinking about this week about what should I talk about. Obviously, I talk about career because lots of people usually have questions about that kind of stuff. But I think what most people want to know is how do you get better in kendo? That's always the question. Like, oh, how? How does it work? How do I get better at it? It's a relatively simple answer, uh, and you've probably been told it a million times already. It's posture and footwork and these kind of things. And the aim of kendo is to become a better person. It's become a better person, and in order to do that, you need to do that. So it's about self progression in kendo. It's not like a computer game where you turn up and you earn experience points and then boom, you've got 500, you're up to the next level. You have to make that experience count. You have to learn from the experience. And I think that's where a lot of people end up wasting time, really, just doing things just for the sake of doing them rather than thinking about everything you're doing. Um, when you're in class and your sensei is getting you to do your saburi, you should have these things that you're working on. You're not just doing saburi to warm your muscles up. You should be thinking about the way your feet interact with the ground, the way your posture lines up. You should have things you're working on. I don't know if it's common knowledge, but I always like to explain with. I was always taught that the mokuso at the beginning. That's kind of like my little notebook, and the mokuso at the end. So at the beginning, you kind of open up, right, ready for kendo. I am working on this, and you start to use that time to sort of focus yourself on what you're about to practice. And anything you're doing, you're trying to include your practice alongside the rest of the class practice. And I think found that a very useful tool. It's obviously if your sensei sort of says something that goes completely against that, just drop what you're doing for a second and pick it up when you can. But it's ultimately down to you. You've got to take what your sensei is saying and make it work because it's one of those things. It's proven to work. If people could figure out other ways of doing it, they would have done a long time ago. So you need to first accept it's you. Once you've accepted it's you, you then need to sort of commit to it yourself. So, and that you've got to believe in you can change yourself. If you turn up with the oh, if I just turn up maybe it'll happen, it probably won't. If you're intent on change, you're much more likely to actually affect change in your life. So engage everything with a purpose. You be mindful when you're practicing. So when you're doing, for example, saburi on your own, do different speeds of saburi. Do them really slowly. Do them a bit faster and do them in between and do different timings if you can. And all this helps to, again, that round off your kendo, make it more complete. You'll have a deeper understanding of your Kikentai no Ichi if you're doing different timings. Whereas if you only ever practice one timing, guess what? You're going to know one timing. And then, but later on, kendo gets a little bit more. You've got to be able to sort of time attacks differently in order to strike. Um, so yeah, you practice the whole gamut of things. Practice your saburi, your ashi sabaki, all these basic things. These things that your sensei are always saying, you've got to get these things right. They don't mean just get them right in the dojo. Get them right first, and then you can move on. You can do much more fun stuff in the dojo if you turn up with awesome footwork and great saburi. They'll be like, "Oh, great! Let's do some of the more advanced stuff." I don't want to be watching you shuffling up and down the hall all this time. It's not fun for me. So you've got to take that personal responsibility off and commit to learning it on some of your own time, especially if you're going from week to week, because you're going to kind of build yourself up and then build up. So the experience goes down, but when you're doing it every day, it stays up there a little bit more. So just put a bit of time in, work around your time. For me, there's never an excuse for anything. And I mean, I learned that from my sensei. With a broken arm, you do footwork. there's always an answer. If you've got no time for kendo, I mean, you could get out of bed. The first thing you do is just pick up shinai and do some saburi, or just do a couple of ashi sabaki. Boom, you've done it. It doesn't have to be hours and hours every single day. It's not about time necessarily. The time does add up, obviously, but the quality as well, and the intermittency of it as well. Don't leave it long periods, especially if you're new to it. Just pick up the shinai and hold it once a day. You don't have to do anything with it, but once you kind of get used to holding it every day, then you start wanting to swing it more often, and you just take those baby steps and build yourself up. I think far too many people try and hit things at 100 miles an hour and think that that's going to make them great, but it won't. It'll make them tired. Um, so yeah, have personal goals in kendo. You've got to have something you're working towards. I feel, because you've got to have that passion, that motivation to work towards it. So what is it you're trying to do with kendo? If you're just turning up and you don't know why, find a reason. Yeah, do you want to compete in Shiai? Do you want to grade to a high level? Do you just want to build a close group of friends, and work towards it? You can just turn up and do kendo and enjoy it, and also you could put the energy into creating the community. You can be that glue that holds people together, and that can be your thing. Um, find people who is similar grades to your levels to you. Try and work with them if possible. It's not always possible. I try and travel around. I go to Oxford and I go to London and meet people and train together with them. So you got that as well. I'm not just teaching. I'm also practicing with my contemporaries as well. I used to have one thing that was really good for me in Korea. I had a rival once. My sensei he taught at the university as well, um, and one day he brought the the students along to sort of practice on us. And by this time, I'd gotten really good at my kote. I had this really fast kote, and I was super proud of it. I could always hit it. And this guy came along, and he just hit my kote just faster than I could think about doing it. I was like, "Ah, that's my thing." So I just went away and I just worked and worked and worked on that kote. And then the next time he came, boom, I'd leveled up and I was faster than him now. And I could see in his face, like, and then we just became this kind of, right. No, no, kote's my thing. No, no, kote's my thing. And we sort of had this back and forth every time we'd meet, try and outdo ourselves. And it was really nice when I went back last time. He now has his own dojo, and we got to do some jigeko again. It was the rivalry was still there, and it's really nice to sort of see him again. Um, so when we do get back into the class, I mean, I guess you could do it on Zoom or whatever. Is compare yourself to others, especially if you're at the beginning. So much of kendo can't really be taught verbally, because you say it and it makes perfect sense and people understand it, but it just doesn't happen. So if you're lucky enough to have mirrors, it's a little bit less obvious, but watch the class. You'll know who's in the class, the higher grades, the better at competition, all these kind of things. You know who they are, and look and sort of, well, he does it like that, and the guys that are not so good do it like this, and work out the differences. I certainly did that, and as I sort of worked my way up the line, I was making sure, right, my shinai needs to be in time with the guys up the far end, not down here with me. I want to be up there, so that's what I have to do. And there's a lot of kendo is like that, very visual. I mean, very luckily I didn't speak very much Korean, and I'm a very visual learner. So I essentially learned from like the teacher from Charlie Brown. It's like, and then did the action. So I just, so he never had that issue. My sensei didn't have that issue with me because I couldn't really understand what he's saying unless he was saying like hit men 5 times. If when he was explaining the more intricate parts of it, I was just saw how he did it. So absolute, just pure Mitori Gecko, like pop, 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 boom. So I go boom and just mimic that action. So I didn't have all these confusing kind of words in my head to kind of get in the way. Um, so in terms of that, so it's your responsibility. You've got to do it. Everyone kind of accept. Everyone will go, yeah, 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 yeah. But you actually do. You've got to come up with a plan. You can use things like SMART goals, are very useful ways to sort of get yourself started. So rather than saying I want to be king of kendo, no, that how do you start that? Instead, well, okay, right. I need to start small. I need to get better at Suburi. So you have a SMART goal. SMART goal is where's where my notes? Specific, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time bound. Okay, you can Google what they are, but make sure you can kind of measure what you're doing. If you want to get Suburi, is there a way of measuring how your Suburi are getting better? I.e., can you send a video to your senpai or sensei and say, how do they compare? Am I doing things right? Rather than just kind of go, right, I'm going to do 5,000 Suburi now and expect your muscles may get bigger, but doesn't mean the Suburi are going to get better. It's about the whole thing. Um, find us, as I said before, find a source of motivation, and that comes from having like the a reason for doing what you're doing. And then the most important thing, really, I guess, is having a method, a plan. So wanting to do these things, you need to balance your whole life. So that's where becoming a better person by doing kendo and doing kendo to become a better person. So it's kind of the same circle. If you become a better person generally, your kendo will get better. You'll have the opportunity to do more kendo, for example. If you square your family and you treat your family well and give them the time they deserve, then they'll be more forgiving of you taking time off to do kendo. We'll see. And again, work. You don't want to sacrifice your career in order to do more kendo because you'll lose your job and then you won't be able to afford to do any kendo. It's all basic kind of stuff. I always think of the spidergram thing of just all these different things, and you want the kendo one to just kind of go out here, but it pulls all the other ones with it and pulls mess. You've got to make sure you round that little circle off. And so you think about your fitness on top of doing kendo exercises. Make sure you're fit. It's an important thing. You don't have to be an athlete, but you can't be unfit. You're doing a martial art. Part of that is keeping your body healthy, making sure you're robust enough to do the martial art. Um, Health. Make sure you treat yourself healthy. If you're constantly hungover, you're not going to be very effective in the dojo, are you? If you eat too much junk food and you can't, it's just simple things, and you don't have to be the healthiest person in the world, but look after your health, your mind as well. Make sure make sure you're not stressed when you go into the dojo. I mean, a lot of you're supposed to kind of clear your mind when you step in the dojo, and some people can do that. Others not so much. So maybe you need to sit in your car for 5 minutes and scribble or do something like that, and whatever it takes to sort your stress out. Kendo is actually really good for that anyway. People are always beaming once they finish kendo. They're shouting. You see them at the pub afterwards. They've got big smiles on their faces, even though they've just done a really exhausting workout. They've been screaming at the top of their lungs. And then the another thing you need to balance is your spirit, and that just means make yourself happy. It doesn't have to be spirituality as in religion, but it can be like seeing nature, whatever. Just make sure you're a more content person, because then you'll be a better teacher, you'll be a better student. And they all interconnect anyway. So because they all interconnect, you kind of improve in one area, your kendo gets better. You make an effort to make your kendo better, your life gets a little bit better, as long as you can keep that balance. And and that means that anything or every situation is an opportunity to get better at kendo, whether you've got a shinai in your hand or not. Um, if I think I just if it makes if you got a chance to be a better person, take it, and it will just pay dividends in your kendo. That's always my motivation at the back of my head is right. I want to be better at Kendo, and I want to be a better person. So I try and make that decision. It doesn't mean you have to live life like a saint, of course, but it helps if you can take the higher path more often than not, and then keeping that focus. That's the hard bit. So once you kind of put your plan into action, work out. You need to know yourself really, and how you are motivated. You need to know how to motivate yourself into doing these things. And the most difficult thing is the patience. Kendo, it it does happen quickly and it happens incredibly slowly at the same time. And it happens quickly because you'll be practicing for a while and then you'll just suddenly think, I've really improved in that, and you'll just notice that you've done something. It's not a on off like, oh, now your shodan, this is a certain level. You just notice your kama is slightly better, or you're moving your feet around differently. So I've been working on Ash Spake a lot, and we made a target for practicing outside for the COVID. I was practicing outside with him and doing just some sort of attacking, and I was moving back, and my feet were just sticking like a gecko to the floor. And I was just, oh wow, because I just spent months and months and months practicing this stuff. Suddenly, I was actually experiencing it, and that's one of those little yes moments in kendo you get, like where you can do you've done a while successfully, or you realize your posture's better, or something's working that you've been working on for ages, and it just suddenly realize it's just snuck in under the radar. So that, yeah, you got to, the inconvenience is harder than discomfort, is what I'd say. People want to go out and train for a marathon, they want to work really hard, and then okay, job's done. But with kendo, the job's never done. It's this constant grind, but enjoy. I enjoy doing kendo. It's fun. Kendo can be a lot of fun, and it's not like waving your arms on a roller coaster fun. It's a different kind of fun, but it's still enjoyable. You set yourself a challenge, you work towards it, you achieve your goal, you get the reward. That's really it. If people have any questions about specific things, I can sort of try and elaborate, or any experiences I may have had. I'm happy to talk.
Yes, I do have a question. How does the second dojo compare between the different places you've done kendo? Like, where would you say the best second dojo culture is?
Hmm. Um, I'd have to say Ichibyoshi is mine, but then that's home for me, and it's literally around the corner from my house. So the club in Korea, we didn't have like a second dojo. There would be lots of meals, but you didn't go. Everyone just went home after practice because it was 11 at night and people had to work. Um, Occasionally you'd go out drinking with them. But the second dojo was more meal based on a maybe a monthly basis, and that was a lot of fun because it was more of a big event. But Ichibyoshi is kind of like, you know, I'm at home, I'm with my dojo mates, I'm a 5-10 minute walk from my house. Whereas I go over to Oxford fairly regularly, but I have to drive there. So, and again, it's late when they finish, so you don't get to relax so much. I've got to keep an eye on the time, and I've got to not drink. And the same when I go into London as well. You know, so I used to go into like London Kenyukai and go and visit Toro and all these sort of places, and they go to the pub afterwards, and it's great fun, but you don't get to relax quite so much. I wish I had the money and time to take a hotel, because I'd just go and train all over the place and just have a few beers and just have a good night's sleep afterwards. That'd be perfect.
So, another question. If there was one thing that you did that you could change, what would it be? From like your past kendo. So,
Mm.
time travel. Yes. No consequences.
Oh, that is a tricky one. I'm generally a really positive person, so it doesn't matter even if I've done something wrong. Because I've learned from it. So it might be something I'm doing now, I'm unaware of it. Ah,
Has there never been a time where you just want to go back and slap your past self in the face? Or is that because you started Kendo at a bit of a later time and you're a bit more mature? Instead of like, oh my god, you idiot, how could you even think of doing that? You know.
Yeah, I suppose there was an embarrassing moment I suppose I had, but that was more to do with Korean language. At one of my Kendo dinners, I was trying to learn to say to improve my Korean language because I could only say really short sentences. Uh, and so yeah, I guess I was wearing underpants for quite a long time, so I didn't realize. So when I was first given a gi in Hakama, I was literally given it and like go get changed in there. I was like, okay, phoom. What the hell do I do? I just couldn't figure out what was going on with it. So I just kind of stuck my head out and went, oh. And they just they said, "I'll go and deal with him," and they did. So I guess they sort of like didn't want me completely stripped down. So just like so I was wearing my pants, and then one of the guys was there like, "No, you don't wear your pants in kendo." I was like, "Oh, okay." And then it just happened that we'd be going out for a meal that night. So I just spent the whole time just practicing the sentence in my head, like, "From now on, I will not wear underpants whilst doing kendo. From now on, I will not wear underpants whilst doing kendo. From now on." And then eventually, I built up the courage, to just go, "I'm not wearing any underpants right now." To which I got a lot of odd stares. I was like, now let me rephrase. From now on, whilst doing kendo, I will not be wearing underwear. Which sounds more dodgy when you say it this way, but it made sense to everyone at the time, I hope. But no, in terms of that, I've always tried to go with an open mind, and probably quite an empty one, and just try and work towards it. Just slow chipping away. You're going to make mistakes. I can't think of anything specific. Would have been too long ago.
So we have another question. What's the most memorable Shiite you have ever had? I cannot speak at the moment. Sorry.
Memorable Shiite. Um,
Or are they all just one blob of, yep, I did that, been there.
some of them you just forget. I've had loads of fun incidents in Shiite. My most, I guess, it would be my first Shiite at the WKC because that was when I was, on the biggest stage, and it just felt so much bigger. And I'd done all that preparation. So when I first joined the squad, I got selected for like a Five Nations and bits and pieces, but I wasn't making it onto to the EKCs and the WKCs, and that's where I wanted to get to. So I kind of went away, and I sort of thought, well, because I was just doing what most people do and just doing the same things again and again and again. And it was getting me better, but it wasn't making it the advances that I want to. So I went away and I changed what I was doing and I doubled down and thought, well, I want to do this. So again, I had to commit myself to doing it, like on an internal level, not just say, well, I want to do this. So I have to like, no, you are doing this if you're going to do it. Uh, and so I eventually I got selected for an EKC and then the WKC. And that was the goal. So I mentioned on the flight home I wanted to represent GB, and I'd kind of done it, but I wanted to be on the team and in the individuals and at the WKC. So that's as high as you could sort of get, and the atmosphere was amazing. It sort of started off, as most Shiai do, like the hearts are boom, 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 more than they ever had before, and right from the very off, we start moving around, and then I just moved back, and my heel just stuck on the floor. I'm sure you've done that before. You move around, your foot sticks, and he came forward. I went to step back, and it was stuck. It's like, oh no, bop! Like right at the beginning of the Shiai, I just given away this men cut, and I just felt everything crumbling down. I've come all this way. I've worked this hard just to get knocked out from something silly. Uh, and I remember sort of going back to the line and just kind of going, no, that's I refuse. I refuse to do that. And luckily I managed to get it back. And it's I don't know, maybe not my greatest kendo ever, but I remember vividly knowing exactly what I was going to do, watching what he was doing, so focused. I don't think I've ever been as focused in a shy as I was for that, because I was just like, no, not not going home, not with this.
What did you do for
There's been other
nerves?
ones. Sorry.
What did you do for nerves in that situation? Because like, must be so stressful. Like,
Yeah, I mean, it all goes so quickly. So, um, I guess you part of it is, if you put the work in, you know you've put the work in. So you're kind of you're going back to restart, and that's that. You know, you've done the work. You deserve to be here. You're here. You know, there's no point being scared about losing. You need to be concentrating on winning. It's easier said than done, but I could have quite easily have stepped straight out and him hit me straight again or something like that, but it didn't. I managed to get on top of the nerves and get him back. I think maybe perhaps he kind of got the early point and then tried to hold it, because it was so near the beginning. It just gave me time to sort of work down his defenses.
on to a slightly different topic. You were talking about how the UK has very black and white thinking. Do you see that? Well, do you see that a lot in a lot of your students that you teach? And how do you kind of not beat it out of them, but beat it out of them? Like not physically, but like legally. What's the legal way to beat them out of it?
Hmm. You can't beat it out of them. Um,
Oh,
time will beat it out of them. Frustration will beat it out of them. Like I've said, it's you. A lot of it can't be communicated, which is frustrating, because that's what a lot of sensei do, myself included. Just try and explain it in a million different ways. I mean, a lot of martial arts, you're supposed to tell people what to do, make them do it, and then explain why later on. Um, it doesn't work quite so well in the UK, given that people are sort of paying for it. Even though I paid in Korea, but you kind of. So my first lesson was turn up and do footwork for an hour. Like if I did that to a student in the UK, then they'd probably question why they were doing it. You know, if I sort of said, "Oh, I'm giving you a life lesson," ha ha ha, they'd just think I'd robbed them of their money. So it's difficult. Whereas that that kind of attitude is expected in Asia. So yeah, difficult. I don't know. I'd like to. Sometimes you can break things down. So I think you have to break it down somewhat, especially as that people aren't coming as regularly. It's not every single day, and I know they're not going home and doing as much saburi and ashisabaki as they should be doing. Some people do some, but I don't know how regularly they do it and what have you. So you just have to keep banging the drum, and hopefully they'll march in time after a while, and just not stress. You can't control them; they have to do it themselves. So you, as a sensei, you have to sort of sit back and just watch them get frustrated and like, oh, I'm doing it right. Nope.
sit back and watch them burn. Yes.
Yeah, it's the only way. It's the change has to come from within.
Yeah. It's so frustrating though. Just self improvement. Yeah, such a bother.
It's worth it. It just takes time, and it comes incrementally, little bits. And I think that's the nice bit about being sort of teaching people, is that you notice them improving, and they don't notice. So they're kind of like, oh, I'm still as bad as I was in the first day, and then hopefully, when you got beginners in, you just go, you were worse than them, and they kind of go, oh, oh, I am better. Not much, but yes.
Mhm.
So they don't realize they're improving. And that's the tricky part. I don't realize I'm improving, and then all of a sudden you kind of realize that something you struggled with a while ago, you're not struggling with so much anymore.
I'm going to quickly ask for any last minute questions and then hopefully wrap up.
Hmm.
There's a small time delay. Have you got any fun stories other than yes, underpants?
I had loads of fun stories, I guess. I was once in a Shiai, so I was playing the big dumb foreigner card. Again, I was like, oh, this guy was like, just gave me that stare, like, oh my god, they brought an ogre in or something. And so I kind of got in, stood up, well, didn't stand up from, so I was stood up already, just gave this almighty ki. And during the match, he went to do a ski and hit my shoulder, but his shinai just splintered into like 1,000 pieces. It must have been an old dry shinai because I didn't feel a thing. It's not because I'm made of sturdy stuff. It's like he stabbed me with a balsa wood shinai and it just went poof, and the look on his face as his like sword was just in tatters was priceless. That was a good fun one.
So definitely not helping the whole undefeatable massive ogre aesthetic. For you being prodded with a sword and it obliterating into pieces.
It was just I've never seen it. I've had it happen consequently, but I felt it, and the shinai didn't explode quite. The staves kind of going off, but this really just was splinters everywhere, and they had to clean the court up afterwards. It was quite a sight to behold. I think I got a medal in that tournament as well. I must have terrified everybody.
How much taller, like on average, were you than your opponent? Like how much did they have to go? Hello, I am looking up to you literally.
Not as much as I'd like, to be honest. Koreans are the tallest of the Southeast Asians, unfortunately. Like my sensei was taller than me, and my subordinate, so my instructor. So there was a sensei who ran the dojo, and then like an instructor as well, and he was the same height as me. So occasionally you'd find people who are a bit shorter, more shorter than a short UK person, but there were still quite a few people taller than me. But then when I went to Japan, it's just like, aha! I really noticed the height difference there, especially on the tubes. That was more on the subway stations, whatever. You could actually breathe because your head was like above the cloud of people.
Oh, being tall sounds so handy.
Yeah, it is. I don't. I'm not tall enough. I don't. Well, not tall. I'm not too tall. I think if you're too tall, it kind of gets a bit. You then got these long, silly limbs to sort of deal with, and they probably people. I imagine tall people want to do that really fast, nippy kendo, and it's just so much harder for them. But then they can just kind of go like, ha, 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 you can't hit me.
I think somebody was talking about how they met a really short person who could hit somebody by jumping and going for men, and I still don't physically understand how that would happen, but I would love to see it in person. I think that like the height difference was 150 to 190.
Oh right, that's quite a ways. I guess it's if they're doing it properly and they're looking at their opponent, their head will be down. So it's valuable. The trouble is, tall people tend to sort of keep their head back, which is I don't know if it's right or wrong, but it's annoying. That's what it definitely is.
Is that a UK problem or a worldwide tall person problem?
Mm, maybe a worldwide tall person problem, I'd say. I mean, it's just natural. If you get scored on because somebody hit you on the head, and you're supposed to have this kind of posture anyway, but it's that, and then looking down at your opponent, I guess.
Mm.
Difficult to say. It always seems to be that way when I'm trying to hit it. That's the one thing I can tell you.
Yeah, I get what you mean. So there are
It,
no more questions. I think that is going to wrap it up for today. Thank you so much for coming. Next week we do have a very, very, very special panel, and I would love to see a lot of people there. I've been organizing it for a month, and I can't tell you what it's about, but it's a very important thing. Uh, it's also going to be a charity live stream, so it's I promise it's going to be interesting. Please come. Thank you very much for coming. I hope you all have a lovely weekend. Bye bye.
Bye.